Okay, hello and good evening, everybody. Today I'm speaking to the Crown Prince Adil Nchabeleng, and him and I have been writing to IOL and to other outlets on the energy situation in South Africa, and we're sort of going to be sharing our ideas again today. So, sir, welcome to this channel.
Thank you so much. Quite a pleasure.
So, I want to start off on an article you wrote this week, which you said Eskom has gotten its mojo back. So let me frame you the arguments. I understand it. South Africa was told that Andre de Ruyter, the White Knight, is going to come and save Eskom. Although he came from Nampak, he had no engineering background. And even at Nampak, it wasn't clear to me if he knew what he was doing. But be that as it may. And the Ruyter, if I look at the availability factors of Eskom, has done the worst in terms of performances. So 3 years to turn Eskom around didn't work. Now he blames Mantashe, all these guys. And now you come and you write, now that he's gone, and you say Eskom has got its mojo back. So what do you mean by that? Explain yourself.
Look, I think it's quite straightforward. Over the last year and two, load shedding stages were at the most highest. I mean, we've gone to almost stage 8 and plus. Some areas are experiencing over 15 hours plus of load shedding in terms of power cuts in South Africa. And as a result, it's been very difficult for people to have a normal life. You can't plan, you can't run a business, there's no operations, the whole disruption of economic activity and movement. So this was the last 2 years, right? In the worst intense form ever experienced in South Africa. We've never had a period like that, whereby people even started experiencing almost psychological conditions related to load shedding or power cuts. And it became so worse that there was nothing manageable. And one, it was on the basis that we kept on saying the repeated words that there is a huge management lackluster and strategic focus, whereby executives at Eskom did not really prioritize at the time. I mean, it was under the leadership of Andre de Ruyter, did not prioritize fixing, resolving the crisis at power stations, which is just to make sure that power stations are operational, everything is working. There is lights, there is a huge supply and refurbishment program for power stations, and that didn't happen. I mean, and it caused this level of breakdowns to a point where Eskom was running at 19,000 to 20,000 megawatts of unplanned breakdowns. You tell me of any power station that has 50,000 megawatts, has 20,000 megawatts of unplanned, has a further 5,000 megawatts of planned maintenance, 25,000 out, 25,000 currently available for providing the market. So you were running below almost your margins. You don't even have reserve capacity, nothing. And this is what caused the situation of almost the close to a collapse of Eskom. It was not because power stations didn't have the capacity to work and operate. It was because management had taken a decision that strategically they are not going to do anything to support maintenance, refurbishment, fixing, as well as retrofits on power stations to ensure that they retrofit them with brand new equipment and technology to make sure that it continues its life of a plant. So there is this scenario that I'm painting the last 2 years. Then over the last 2 months, literally 2 months, right, comes in April, the new leadership, when the presidency announced, and President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's announcing the appointment of a electricity minister, and the responsibility and role of an electricity minister will be to fix the challenges of load shedding and implement what is called currently South African Energy Policy Plan, called the Energy Plan. Right? And in the energy plan, the whole plan looks at what can be done to bring back units into operation, to start adding additional capacity onto the grid, and to ensure that they stabilize the provision of electricity in South Africa market and economy. It's called the Energy Action Plan. So on that Energy Action Plan, the new minister takes it and starts running with it. On his first week, he visits about 15 power stations. In there, he does an analysis, with the scoping of what is going on, what's happening, what's wrong, and all of that. And the conclusion comes down to say there is an utter disproportional level of mismanagement lack of performance. There is no anything happening at power stations. I mean, Duva, when he visited, it was sitting at 17% EAF.
Just for clarity, which minister are you talking about? Because we seem to have two in charge at the moment.
Minister Sputa Ramokgopa, he is the
Okay,
Minister of
electricity.
Electricity.
Okay.
Yeah. So Minister Sputa Ramokgopa, who's a doctor in civil engineering and science, but who then brought in this new revived energy based on the fact that South Africa was breaking down and it was actually threatening the ruling party in terms of its governance. I mean, the ANC was facing a huge challenge whereby people were starting to literally take to the streets to say this is unbearable, unacceptable. If things continue at this rate, something drastic will have to be done. And that drastic meant purely that they will have to kick out the ruling party out of power. Even opposition parties were calling for an early snap elections at the time. So, cutting a long story short, 2 months down the line, since April till today, July, we have a completely changed environment. Power stations are working. Duva has moved from 17% to 81% EAF. In 1 month after the visit, right? So you have so something tells you that someone didn't do their job, and I'm not saying on a facetious level or to speak bad about Andre de Ruyter and everything, but he clearly didn't do his work, because had he been interested in sustaining Eskom, running the business of Eskom, run power stations, make sure that they are producing electricity, additional capacity is welcome. This is a growing economy. This is a growing country.
Yes,
we need more power. We need more power stations. We need more energy generation sources. And we need a diversified offering on energy solutions. So do that, but don't hamstring, the goose that lays the golden egg and kill it and leave us in the dark. And in the same time, tell us that you're no longer interested in coal and you're moving away from coal, which is the bedrock of South Africa's electricity. And you're introducing.
I want to just get you in, stop you then, just give a few facts on coal. South Africa burns more coal per person than China. We are one of the highest, if not the highest, in the world. Okay, we don't have major oil reserves. Now they're talking about discovery, but I'm always skeptical about that. Our petrol comes from coal. We're one of the few countries in the world that can do that at a sustainable level. Okay. I look at figures from Mpumalanga. Something like 3.2 million people in one way or another are connected into the coal economy. Now you can multiply that by whatever factor to get to families. And yeah, I was just baffled. Here we had a guy in charge who writes a book that apparently his daughter inspires him from, who lives in Germany, which is just weird as hell. And they want to commit to green energy. Okay. And that was the first thing that made me very skeptical of this story. The second one made me even more skeptical is when Jacques Pau wrote about Eskom and the story that, remember, he said Russia was attacking us or something, and the coffee lady poisoning him. Well, it turns out that the person, that story was made up by a former apartheid era spy. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So we don't even know if he was poisoned. Okay, so I was very skeptical when I read that story, and I said, okay, maybe it's not the writer, but maybe it's people around him. I don't know who to blame on that thing, but this is not how you run a power utility. You don't make up coffee poisoning stories. I'm sorry, guys. This is not how you do things. And yeah, as you say, the new guys come in, and it seems to be fine. Okay, so you say. So I want to now add just another factor in here. Institute of Race Relations. So this is Dr. Frans Cornier. A few months ago, I'm getting him on my channel tomorrow to speak about this. Come out with a report that says more or less what you've been saying. Okay, so people can say the blacks have been saying it's cool. I said, okay, well now Frans Cornier, Institute of Race Relations, the DA's think tank, okay, comes out and they say South Africa can end load shedding if we just optimize our coal fleet. Okay, isn't that what you've been saying? So what's the problem here? We have the solution.
Look, the problem has been leadership, and it has been really lackluster leadership, starting from the top, really. And until there was a challenge to say the ruling party might lose its position in terms of leadership, and there might be a call for a snap election, or even there might be uprisings, because we were at the precipice, really, of a what they would call it, riots and uprisings, because it was so much that people couldn't even cope. You couldn't even work. You couldn't even have a business, shutdown of businesses. Normal life, you have over 12 hours without electricity in daytime. I mean, this is not sensible. There's only 12 hours of daytime where there's light. and you have daytime with no light, and you expect people to still be tolerant and sort of progressive enough to put up with that whole disruption of their life. So this thing became so much that it actually, there was even really sort of signs and signals on the street that we might have an Arab Spring at any time. And these are not things that I'm making up. This is the mood that actually was expressed earlier around March or February, March, when people just had enough with this whole nonsense, the excuses and everything, and the rebelliousness against the president's position when he said that he's exiting out of coal, and the South Africans rebelled against it. Was as a
Yeah.
result, you're saying to us that you're exiting out of coal, but you have nothing alternative ready. There are no power plants that are running away from, that are running not using coal, that are ready. You're substituting, you're shutting down power plants because they had shut down real power plants, 20,000 megawatts worth
Yeah.
of electricity was unavailable. Power plants were just completely sitting idle, partly mothballed. Some of them were just under the assumption that the units have broken down and should not be repaired. At some instances, people were just told, listen, flip a switch on that unit and make sure that it stays down for whatever reason. And then there were issues of sabotage and everything. And then this is an asset. That is the key point, right? It's under military guardian and stewardship of the police in terms of security management. So you can't tell me there were outside factors that came in, unnoticed, unfound, which will actually surmount to terrorism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Into the power plants. If anybody had to
Okay.
come in and start fiddling internally within those power plants,
That never made sense to me. I'm sorry. I've people been to a power plant. I've been at Letabo, and I've been years ago when I worked for Lafarge, and I've been to Matimba. Have they seen the security checks and the things to get there? And it's in the middle of nowhere, some of these plants. How do you just go there and sabotage of a team at night? It didn't add up to me,
when that happens, you have a terrorist operation and units operating in South Africa. We didn't hear of it. Apparently, it was operations inside. How were these people structured? Were they cells? Were they a group of criminals? Were they a group of terrorists who were so organized that they could infiltrate directly into power plants and flip the switches and break the units and destroy the infrastructure, etc., etc.? So those are the things that the management completely lost control and focus over. But Andre de Ruyter made his intentions clear that he is not interested in coal or coal fleet-based power stations. His vision within Eskom was to move Eskom away from coal, which means shut down the power plants, create load shedding and power crisis. In the interim, come up with a solution of providing alternative energy. Could have made sense if you had an alternative, right?
Yes.
You could have succeeded if you had additional.
But let me ask you this: what is the installed renewables on rooftops at the moment in South Africa?
Look, right now rooftops is about 4,500 to 4,000.
Let's say 4 gigawatts. South Africa is what? Yeah,
Yeah.
rooftops 4. Okay.
Of installed IPPs, re-IPPs, renewables energy, what you call independent power stations, is about 7,600 megawatts.
Okay.
Around there, right? 7,700.
So let's say you've got 4 plus 7, you have 11. 11 out of 40. Okay, or at 50. You see what people don't understand when they say we can go for renewables. I'm all for it. Okay, you can put the wind in Richards Bay. There. You need to build transmission lines. You need to integrate them. You need to build all of those things, and you're not going to do it tomorrow. So let's accept we are still with coal for a very long time.
The scorecard on a daily basis, we've got the stats. On a daily basis, the maximum peaking power output of re-IPPs, the whole of re-IPPs in South Africa, right? The IPPs, independent power producers, they're peaking at 800 megawatts with a spike, almost a frequency spike that is like a heartbeat of 800 peaking megawatts of the total installed 7,700, peaking at 800 megawatts, which is not even firm capacity. It is non-dispatchable. Most of the time, Eskom works on a policy whereby they curtail the power. They would accept it and pay for it, but they would not put it into the transmission grid because it is just totally disruptive. And there are no peaker plants, which are gas plants that can kick in at the source in order to balance the frequency level and make sure that the energy is transmissible. into the grid.
but
So
but but
those are
you,
the basic phenomena. You
but,
and
but you
I
see,
cannot
yes,
ever argue science.
yeah, but yeah, yeah, yes, where the people missed the entire debate in South Africa. 73 oil crisis came and the United States moved towards a privatization grid. Europe a bit later. They have
Mm.
systematically built out transmission lines and peaking plants, and now they're adding batteries. And you can now buy power from Norway and sell it in Spain, and how this thing works. Okay, South Africa still has a nationalized grid. These things work on two different principles. You cannot just take one and operate like the other one. So we are stuck with good old coal, king coal, which is still peaking worldwide. I saw yesterday this year is the best year ever for coal. Vietnam is still building, China is still building, Indonesia is building, India is building. We are like those countries. We are not like European countries. And that is the first mindset people need to build. Let's build more coal. Okay, so I wrote an
Mm.
article and when I get your view on there where I say to Sputla, let's
Yeah.
just burn coal. So what do you think about that?
Look, I totally agree. We must build more coal power plants, and we must make sure that we actually, turn coal that we have, which is the most cheapest source of energy available in terms of a feedstock, turn it for industrial purposes, like all the other industrialized nations. I mean, China, you're looking at India, you're looking at Europe, you're looking at currently, Southeast Asia. They're all using it. You're looking at Ukraine and you're looking at Russia. They're all using coal power plants, you know. And yet, when you come to America, by the way, has the largest coal power fleet. South
Yeah.
America, the same. So coal is available. Coal is the most natural resource available on earth across countries. It's not just one country that holds a monopoly. And that is why it was a strategic energy fuel source to be used and to be used almost in perpetuity. In South Africa, we've got coal capacity that is estimated to be worth over 400 years on discoverable reserves now currently being mined, right? We're not talking about almost undiscovered, as well as discovered but not even mined. There
Yes.
is a huge Lepalale region that is sitting with massive basin, has not even yet been mined, all right? Has not even yet been extracted. That capacity is over 2,000 years. So you can see the dichotomy of the problem is here in South Africa, we have been played an African idiot game. Africans are idiot as usual. You can dictate to them, and I raised this issue in the article. Europe can come and dictate to African leaders as to why and what they should use in order to advance their geopolitical interest as well as their strategic interest to run their economy, which means we're not in charge. If your energy policy is determined by Europe, European Union is determined by the UK, your energy policy is determined by Americans, what does it leave you with in terms of your sovereignty, power, and levers?
Yeah.
Germans are in South Africa, breathing heavily on every quarter of policy sector, from Treasury right down to the Department of Environmental Affairs, where they're telling you about the emissions. But nobody says, but us in Germany, we are the largest automotive producers, we're the largest steel producers, we're the largest smelters and refineries producers, and we are using this particular electricity coming out of coal, coming out of what do you call it, coming out of nuclear and gas, which are all fossil fuels, right? To use all of that energy to produce our economic miracle, the number one total exporter of goods, finished goods in the world, right? They're not coming up with that argument. But they come to South Africa and come and impose on us this draconian, silly rules of saying that we cannot use our coal to industrialize. And I'm taking you a history. When coal was started, coal mining started in South Africa, it started off by the championing by what do you call it, Dr. Van der Bijl. Dr.
Yes.
Van der Bijl, when he was given the opportunity around the 1920, 30s, right, when the electricity bill was enacted, he said that we want to be toe to toe with Western countries as South Africa in terms of industrialization and be regarded amongst the leaders in the world around industrialization in terms of electrification and steel producing
Yeah.
countries in
But,
the
but
world.
but but you see, Van der Bijl studied in America and he studied the New Deal and he brought the New Deal to America because that is what works. And people go on about this Chinese model as if it's something new to this world. The Chinese model is the New Deal. Okay, it's a state-driven, heavy industrial growth, and then you have a market to diffuse technology. It's the same with the Japanese model. There are varieties between them, but it's not a new model. So, for
Mm,
South Africa to say, here's how I look at it. If I look at per capita energy in the world, America is 4 times South Africa. I think it's about
mm,
2.5 times China. China only surpassed South Africa a decade ago. Okay, we were still a
mm.
part of China not that long ago. We need to double our capacity and double again to be like America in terms of industrial output. Maybe we can get somewhere less with efficiencies these days, but either way, we need to increase directionality. Stay. Let's just do what the countries are doing who are like us. Okay, what is Turkey doing? What is Iran doing? What is Brazil doing? What is China doing? Okay, they're in social economic development. China's maybe a bit more ahead industrially, all burning coal and nuclear. Yes, they are adding renewables, and I'm all for that. We have the resources. Let's not blow that for dogmatic reason. But they are basically expanding the industrial base still. And we are being told in Africa, and this is what really annoys me. Africa's energy consumption is 1/80 of the United States, and South Africa is half of that. Okay? We're half of Africa's energy consumption. And we are being told that we need to go for sustainable development, which basically means a service sector economy directly, and we cannot have any industry. In what
No,
world does that logic make sense to you?
nothing. Let me give you a quick example, right, on this particular discussion. Let's take computers, for instance. In the computer world, there's two operating systems. There's the Mac, niche market. Then there is the open market, which is Windows based.
Yeah.
And then there is almost non-existent now, the open source market, right? In there, they are all operating systems. The most operating computers in the world are currently using Windows. Then comes in the Mac specialization, specialty technology for designers, for high-end engineering and whatever, or for high-end whatever. Okay. A niche market, let's say 1% of the users of computers in the world are using Mac and Mac advanced technology, right? Apple's operating system. Now, you tell us that your cheap Mac, or what do you call it, your cheap operating Windows source, Windows computer, right, should be done away with. And in its place, go and buy yourselves Apple Mac, professional version, scale, and operate that for your day-to-day use. That's exactly what is happening here. We're told to go and buy Rolls Royces,
Yeah.
give up our Toyotas, our running Kias, our little Peugeots that are running around the streets and the town that don't break down. And we're told to go and buy ourselves Rolls Royces and Bentleys in order to run on a daily basis. And that's what is happening. This is an injustice happening in Africa right now. And if you want to reach those, particular milestones, you either drive those Rolls Royces because they already make takeoffs, like what we're talking about, this whole climate crisis and concern. We're not
Yeah.
moving away because there is famine, because there is huge level of genocide. We're not moving away because there is level of crimes in the world. We're not moving away because there is level of mortality, where there's birth rates and death rates and everything. We're not moving away because people have no homes, people they have no jobs. No, we're moving away purely because somebody tells us, and I'm going to be very frank about it, that the air quality we breathe is not of a good quality enough.
Yeah.
And as a result, we must change everything of our lives to adopt to the current standards of introducing renewables as an alternative to coal. They're not saying renewables are actually worse than coal because they consume more coal per ton of production in terms of production of your wafer
So yeah.
production
So
than
the argument is you don't mind for fuel. Okay, fine. I can accept some argument of that. But my
Mm,
point is this, okay? First of all, South Africa is completely capable, I mean, you will probably know this more better than I do, of manufacturing solar panels ourselves.
of
Completely
course, we can-
viable. Why don't we manufacture it and we start using it, and then we can get people jobs and used to it in addition to the coal? But you see, it's always, this is the weird thing about this debate.
but
You
that's
can
not the
never go
point.
for, you're never allowed to go for a mixed economy. You're always supposed to go for the solar panel and windmill that is made in those countries who tell you what the policy have to be. Okay, this is a very strange debate to me. This is not about the environment, because we're 1% of the world's CO2. We can fall into the ocean tomorrow; it makes no difference. Our coal can
Exactly.
go away tomorrow, it makes no difference. No, this is about making money primarily, and it's about not having giving us the industrial ability to solve our own problems. This is how I see it.
That's what it is. It's actually an instrument of military coercion, where we are coerced into a position that says deindustrialize on the pretext that if you are currently enjoying this industrial growth and development, its impact is affecting somebody in the Europe or Northern America or in the North. Here in the South, you're supposed to stay in the dark, which they've done. I mean, with load shedding, power cuts was telling you clearly that you're going to
Yeah.
stay in the dark, and they had an enforcer. And it was only until there was almost a rebellion on the streets that things started turning around. Suddenly, power stations were switched on. Literally, just like that, the flick of a switch. They were all
But
up and running.
but you see, this is where I think I mentioned this in my article this week. So Sputla got a lesson in the iron law of electricity. If you mess with electricity system, you start provoking internal conflict in your country. It's been seen in France in 2008, a much more advanced country, industrially speaking, in South Africa. Macron could not contain it. Macron was anti-nuclear and pro-Thatcher and all these things. Today he's renationalizing EDF and they're rebuilding nuclear. Why? Because the French workers said, to hell with you guys, we know what you're doing. You're trying to destroy the strategic national assets of the country. And guess what? Happens in South Africa as well. But here's my question. Do you think that Ramaphosa, who now found his new religion, and Sputla and these guys are serious about recommitting to coal? Or is it just still talking in the media?
No, I don't think they have found gold. They are literally working on the interest of the society. They are working under the pressure of society. If they had their way, they will still continue with
Yeah.
the industrialization process, the shutting down of power plants and everything. It's the same with what happened in France. I mean, let me give you an example. The Yellow Vest mass movement that swept through France over the last 4 years was as a result of energy prices from gas and even food and whatever,
Yeah.
as well as the wage gap, wage issues. So the same issue of energy will give you a headache at the national level if you don't take care of it. And South Africa has been a case in point. But in Africa, the strange thing is these guys are totally so committed to undermining everything and everybody. So even as much as, for instance, the national pressure and key points are saying that you cannot go against the people's need to have basic electricity availability, they're still going against that whole grain and saying we're going to push this economy and this country into almost a fall on enforcing on them a energy trajectory policy which they don't want. Every South African, if you could ask them today, if you could, would you open up more coal power plants? They'll tell you, please open up as early as yesterday.
Yeah.
As early as yesterday. You know why? Out of the households, I wrote an article about 2, 3 weeks ago on my column. I said, government has failed to even promote to ordinary citizens the installation of rooftop solars. You know why? Because it's just so expensive and so
Yeah.
unaffordable that they themselves cannot even commit to it. Each household would require 150,000 minimum rents
And
in order to install.
who's got that on his bond? Most people, you have to take extra money on your bond. It's
Not
ridiculous.
only that, a minimum house, a 70 square meter house, would require 150,000 megawatts rents, right? Just to have lights in the night. We're not talking heating, we're not talking cooling, we're not talking extra luxuries, just basic lights as well as primary electricity in your home, running fridges, appliances, and everything. But anything that has to do with huge drawing and everything, you won't be able to afford because your battery capacity will be inhibiting. So, an ordinary RDP house, which was built by government for less than 50,000, even if it makes, say, 100,000 was built by government, an ordinary house, they have to go further invest 150,000 more onto one component in the home, which is to install a solar component. When you write it down when you write it off on your books over 10 years, it's an equal repayment as paying, if not less, than paying your electricity month-to-month rate bill at Eskom. So the fundamentals are not there.
No.
As
And,
much as we would like to push the religion of renewables and moving away from fossil fuels based energy, the fundamentals to support the argument are not in place. It's too expensive, it's unaffordable, it's unreliable, it's not used for any industrial purposes. Industrial areas by now would have all installed and told Eskom where to get off. They would have all currently been self supplying and self providing. And they would have told Eskom, we don't need your power grid. In case there's for instance, maybe there's an earthquake, we might just call on you. But now, for now, we don't need you because we've got our own uninterrupted, unintermittent
But you
reliability.
see, here's another problem with this household solar stuff. Okay, great. First of all, you say most people can't afford it, but now those who can afford it eats into Eskom's revenue. And then we're going to complain the next time, but Eskom is unaffordable and the stations are standing idle. We need to mothball more. You could see this argument coming down the line, right?
No, ESCOM doesn't even care. ESCOM is it's even encouraging ordinary citizens, people who are currently users, even heavy users, intensive energy users, to cut down on consumption of electricity because they have reached a capacity and limitation. Remember, every time there is a demand of, say, 27,000 megawatts in summer of electricity consumption, and ESCOM cannot even reach that threshold, it means what they're doing, they are starting to lose money. There are key customers on the intensive energy users that they must pay back for the unfulfilled contract, for the SLA that they are not keeping. So it's cheaper for them to tell you, no, get off the grid, actually lessen the usage of your electricity because it's costing them more in penalties. So they would be happy to have anyone who wants to move away in any way, move away from ESCOM. So the issue of revenue is not a key driver for ESCOM because they have something called a revenue recovery model where they apply for a recoverable revenue that they need to operate. So they're not driven by profits, they're not driven by shareholders' interest of returning a sizable dividend over to shareholders. There's no such thing.
But let's speak about that shareholder thing. I mean, isn't it time that we say Eskom should go back and run like a proper utility where they don't make profit for shareholders, they just recover their costs, and then we can allow it through that way to recapitalize a little bit? I mean, is it really necessary that they? It never made sense to me that Eskom can have shareholders to begin with, because first of all, they
No,
rely on government money anyways. You know.
sure. No. You see what they did, these guys, they were clever. They created an ESCOM company, moving it away from the old commission structure, which was an NGO at the time, right? It was registered as an NGO under a commission for electricity committee, supply committee, right? At the time. So what then happened is they just structured it under corporate rules. It does not make any profit. It does not declare profit. If it makes a profit, it's regarded as carried over capital into the next year, and it gets shown as a positive. So there's no dividend declaration and everything. If there's anything that they pay themselves out, is actually huge bonuses as well as whatever it is that they could use for expenses. But the model of ESCOM right now is it's a almost a non-profit based company with a so-called shareholder who looks after the interest of the government department's responsibility. So the shareholder code right now currently is under Minister Pravin Gordhan, who is the shareholder under the Department of Public Enterprises. So public enterprises becomes the custodian for the public on the public asset that it's managing. So the currently recoverable tariff, allowed recoverable tariff that comes out of NESA, it's only to offset the cost. And that is why ESCOM keeps being the most cheapest utility supplier. The same company bring it with private investors. You will see a complete fire.
No, I'm totally against the privatization of Eskom because people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about it. The private capital in South Africa does not have the money the state has. Okay, first of all. The second thing is if you're going to privatize a system that doesn't even deliver properly, it's going to be strip mined and you're going to cause more problems in the process. So for this, may keep it nationalized. I have no issue. Just add capacity to the grid. That should be our primary. Our job at the moment should be building reactors. Now, I want to get your view onto something else here. South Africa, by my estimates, and I might be a bit off with yours, needs between 11 to 15 gigawatts on the grid at the moment to solve load shedding. Okay, that's sort of what I do a rough calculation. My view, the quickest way to do it is to restart, to find out which of these, 15 to 20 gigawatt is still working and restart them. And then the second one is to import LNG. And then the third one that I proposed is that we start planning for nuclear along the coast, and we start doing it yesterday. It's not why should we stop building and getting those out? Because even if you build a plant today, it's going to come online in a decade. Okay, if we're honest, and by a decade's time, another 15 gigawatt will be offline because the plants, are starting to age. So, when are we going to start seeing new plants being built and new capacity being added?
Look, South Africa entered into a draconian contract with the World Bank when they signed the Paris Climate Accord. In that Paris Climate Accord, they agreed that they're not going to ever build any more fossil fuel based station. So nuclear is out of the picture, coal is out of the picture, even gas power plants are out of the picture right now as we speak. You cannot build any of them.
We
The
signed
agreement
that.
with the World Bank, yes, it's signed. Check the Paris Climate Accord signature. South Africa put its signature in there. The World Bank, when they gave money to build Medupi and Kusile, made a dictation to say, we are giving you the last tranche of a loan. This loan will never ever be renewed on the basis that you're never ever going to be building a brand new power plant again. This is facts. Nobody want to talk about them. It's in the agreement with the World Bank and IMF for the contract for the loan term between.
I mean, how stupid can we be? Honestly, what did we do? I mean, this is just stupid, really. So we basically said we're never going to have fossil fuels, but now I see tenders are going out for Richards Bay and for these areas. So are we just ignoring the World Bank agreement? What are we doing?
On what?
I
On
mean,
the LNG terminal?
on the LNG, it's not just
No,
LNG.
they're not building.
They're
No,
not
they're
building.
not, but they're very clever. They're not building. They're building a terminal which will be providing gas to a power ship which is not a South African built power station.
Uh-huh. I see what you mean.
You're not building a brand new thing. It's an IPP. There are two mines, for instance, in the Limpopo region in Mosina, which the Department of DMRE, Department of Minerals and Energy, had given a permission to build brand new two mines for about 500 megawatts of coal power plant to feed that Mosina mining complex. Those power plants were opposed, maybe because they were going to be built by the Chinese, and the Chinese had the tender on it. But those power plants were opposed. They are still in court today under heavy NGO as well as green
Uh-huh.
lobby opposition.
Okay, so here's then my question: what laws are the NGOs abusing? Because surely South Africa still has a parliament that makes laws, right? And it's not just international law. Which law should we get rid of so we can go ahead with these things?
No, you can't get rid of any law to go ahead with it. Your NGOs are using the South African courts.
Yeah.
If you want to go ahead, it means you have to get rid of the current judges and you have to get rid of the current court system because the court
Yeah, but
system.
sure, the court certainly interprets the law. Now, if there's no law to interpret,
No, there's no law to interpretation. They interpret an argument. They don't use law to interpret the current situation. Even if DMR has made it a law, when it comes to the argument in court, they listen to the so-called virtues of the argument in regards to the law itself, and they will give you their interpretation. And it's mostly technical. They listen to the technical salient elements of the law itself,
okay.
and they listen to these technical arguments.
So,
And based on that,
my view is with environmental laws. Part of this is a constitutional problem here, but we need to first of all base our environmental and public health laws away from precautionary principles because that's what they abuse. Okay,
yeah.
and we need to move to risk-based or what we call hormetic principles. A certain level of toxins actually good for you. A few cigarettes is not the end of the world type of thing, okay? But there's a level that's obviously dangerous, and that is what the cost should come into. This is the first one. The second one that I would like to see and get your view on this is New Zealand has banned Greenpeace. India has banned Greenpeace. India has gone further. They made a calculation through national intelligence, and they said NGOs cost us 3% of GDP per year. It's a risk to national security. We are cutting off all the foreign funding of NGOs. And guess what? France's military intelligence a few weeks came out and they said all these German NGOs, Rosa Luxemburg, Heinrich Böll Foundation, the same characters in South Africa that's blocking us, are a threat to French national security now. And France is going to start taking it more seriously. So isn't this maybe a national security issue? They need to start looking into it and say, cut these guys funding off if they're blocking us that way.
Yeah, but they're in charge. So how are you going to even get it right when the national security intelligence, as well as agencies of government, are currently controlled by the same people pushing the agenda? Look, this is an international agenda. This is a global agenda against South Africa. There are people visiting this country at every top level globally, from secretaries of state to ordinary. Macron was here in South Africa. We have we have every delegation coming to visit South Africa to tell South Africans to move away from the use of coal and the current production of electricity from coal power plants It's not like they're coming with something that is going to substitute anything. They're not bringing in brand new coal, whatever.
Okay, but somewhere along the line, we need to find a way to stand up. Our leaders must put their foot down, like the Chinese are doing. I mean, China's building coal two a month or something. I checked last time. They couldn't
Yeah,
care less. So why
yeah.
don't we just get the Chinese to come and build it for us and say, "Sorry, guys, we
No,
signed an
that's
agreement.
what I'm
Go to
saying. The
hell."
interference at the policy level is
Yeah.
to such extent that our leaders are completely paralyzed. They don't know which direction to turn.
Okay. So
They
so we
can,
need policy then.
yeah, at a policy plus at the decision making level. We had taken a decision with the IRP, for instance, 2019. The IRP 19 says clearly that South Africa's policy trajectory must be one, to build this and this and this and that, give a percentage to renewables, give the current existing larger chunk of percentage to coal, introduce part of the nuclear, and then do the refurbishment of coal power plants and remove the emissions with a high efficiency, low emissions technology
Yeah, it's good.
and retrofit them and extend the life of plants on those things. But now, none of that is being considered. Instead, they are accelerating the decommissioning of power plants under the disguise that they have reached end of life of these power plants. They're accelerating them. There's the deadlines now that every power plant must meet. Komati was one of them. And all of them that are closing down, irrespective of whether they're still operational, they can be extended, they can still provide electricity, they are still in sound technical working condition for the next 20, 30 years. Nobody gives a damn. They're saying
But
there's a
but but
deadline.
let me get just the facts on Kumati quickly, because now there's been disputes of Kumati where they said there was only 100 megawatts still working and things. How do you see that thing? They said Sputla is lying when he says,
The
uh,
last unit which was
mm,
switched off at Komati was about 130 odd, 132 odd units.
okay,
What do you call 132 megawatts? It was a unit. It was not the total of Komati. Komati is broken down in several units, and those units were producing electricity and were in good production capacity, but were scaled down in terms of shutdown systematically in order to drive this current experiment of moving away and introducing renewables. And on that site, imagine you're taking a power station site with all the licenses, with all the environmental impact. You have everything that you would do over 10 years to build a power plant. You're taking all of those things and overnight you're supplying something that can be bought from Macro or Walmart and then put it up with no requirement for anything. And then you're taking those things and you're saying you're replacing that capacity with that technology. So it's undermining to make sure that that site is never visited, to dismantle it systematically with technology that once it's dismantled, there's nothing you can go back to. What happened in the past, in the apartheid days when they mothballed, they actually kept it operationally sound and they shut it down without running the units but maintaining the technology. That's what they did.
yeah, it's
In
cheap to
terms of,
maintain.
yeah, and they because they didn't need it because they had so much electricity. There was no need to produce more and have it idle. I mean, of course, they couldn't give it to black people to industrialize
Mm.
them because it was during apartheid. But they said rather let's mothball this and keep it in sound technical capacity to operate. And when we need it, we just lift off the blanket and the sheet, and we're able to switch on this thing and it runs efficiently. But in our case, we are forced to shut down Komati. The town is devastated. The jobs are devastated. The industry complete, I mean, vertically integrated value chain, tracking your schooling, your education, your jobs environment, your communities, people who dependent on that, chartered accountants. We're talking people who were teachers, people. I mean, it's an entire life of its own
Yeah, it's
has
all
been totally,
collapsed.
yeah, it's been disrupted totally like that. In order to fulfill an interest of a passive need that is driven by somebody who's
But
running a venture company, venture
and
capital.
doing that in a country that lacks electricity is just beyond callous. And yet our leaders are doing that. This is what I don't get.
That's
Okay,
why
if it's the US, I can understand maybe gas is cheaper or maybe a wind and gas combined, whatever. Okay, but we lack electricity, and there you go, and you don't want us to use the capacity that we have. Now, my question to you is this: if assuming government changes policy tomorrow and said let's just recommit to coal to solve our electricity, and then later we can solve this environmental crap, okay? How long do you think we can take to get Komati and the others comparable power stations back online?
No, Komati will take you less than 3 months. It's ready. It's an operational plant. It's kind of under mothballed.
Switch
Right
it
now,
on.
they are trying to destroy bits and pieces of it. Remember, Komati was mothballed, was just closed down.
But then
It was closed
let's switch it
down.
on. I mean, that should be government's
Ah.
first commitment. Let's just say, look, we
But
want Komati
remember,
back. Let's do
again,
that.
no, Hugo, don't forget, the current close down was not just for mothballing purposes, was to dismantle it now. The quicker they can dismantle it, to do the retrofit for solar and wind plan that they have, as well as this battery park model that they are currently funding, the better they can have a case study. So you'll have no more site available of Komati. It will be a historical Komati because everything will be dismantled. Most of the metal will be sent off for metal scrap metal and be salvaged, and there will be no site available. So it's systematic, and people don't understand that part of it, the agency, to say stop this madness before it goes too far.
Okay,
Because it's a total.
how do we stop this thing? Let me ask you this: how do people stop it? What do they need to
Look,
do?
I
What do
think,
they need to
well,
do?
look, on our side, we're activists at a professional level where we speak about it, we engage policy, we opine our views, we share them in papers, we do all other things. But the communities affected, the unions, the people losing their livelihoods, the decision makers, parliament itself, people who are paid to do this job, must get their working gear in order and go and oppose this current situation whereby we're having a total destruction of a strategic asset like a power station, Komati, and must stand up and say it's enough. We're going to protect the livelihoods, we're going to protect the lives of the people living in this community, and we're going to refurbish these power plants, bring them back to operation until we have an alternative that can erase and substitute the current power capacity of Komatu. We're not going to move away until you build something that is equivalent and match.
Until we have excess capacity in South Africa, where our prices can be as cheap as it was in the 90s, because that's why it was cheap,
Exactly.
okay? Then we can do it.
Exactly.
Last question for you, because Komati, we can talk ages about the injustice there. I want to get your view on NERSA and the municipality. So as I understand it, NERSA sets a tariff. I'm skeptical if that tariff isn't maybe too low. Some people say it's too high, but whatever. But it seems municipalities cannot recover, or Eskom cannot recover direct costs. Now, isn't it better to, I mean, I don't know, it's a political question, it's maybe not that easy. Isn't it better to allow Eskom to recover the cost and pay the difference over to the municipalities as opposed to the other way around?
No, Eskom can directly recover its cost. The only problem is Eskom has been mismanaging its account facility management, account facilities, with regards to how they actually allow municipalities to create this credit. If they could, they would have should have already set up structures in place whereby municipalities will provide them with credit guarantees, where there will be money paid up front as a deposit for the electricity that they're going to be consuming. Because if you come to the consumer side of it, all consumers mostly in South Africa are paying on prepaid.
Yeah.
Before use, they will buy more electricity before use and pay. So what prevents the municipalities from passing over that money over to Eskom on prepaid basis? What prevents them from using that revenue to
But
ensure that they
my view is cut out the middleman entirely.
No, what municipalities are doing is they're taking that money and creating it as their revenue package. They're using that total facility. If you buy electricity at 100 Rand, they take that 100 Rand and put it into their cost structure in the municipalities' finances as part of their total revenue. So where they are not making money, where they are making losses, they make up with the revenue that ought to be paid over to Eskom. So this has been an agreement. I mean, I did a lot of work as well as a lot of explaining over the last 5 years on why municipalities, I mean, there was a crisis where they were sitting at over 40 billion of debt. We gave them a resolution to say, here is a simple, straightforward process of what you can do to go and solve municipal debt crisis.
Because apparently it's a crisis in water as well. It's a crisis in water as well.
So remember, you can't go, municipalities by law and bylaws have a right to access in respect to accessing houses in a municipal environment. So they have bylaws and they have rights to accessing equipment. So Eskom sells to them at bulk. They break it up and make some more profit because the tariff they buy from Eskom is not the tariff they charge us.
Yeah.
They still make a profit on that electricity. And then from there, they then settle their accounts. And that should not have been like that. They could have just paid Eskom directly, take what they use from
Yeah,
ESCOM, sell it at a profit, and then distribute it back. But there is no management in municipalities, by the way. They've
but
messed up.
the way I would do it, okay, I'm being simplistic and I might be wrong. Yeah, I would just say ESCOM recovers it when municipalities set the rate. Municipality can say I want to make 20% profit, for example, on electricity, and ESCOM has to pay 20% back, or maybe municipalities collected 20% and ESCOM collects directly. I mean, my question is, how do you get ESCOM to settle its debt, basically, to become
No, but,
have a good
no,
credit rating against it?
no, Hugo, apartheid solved this problem a long time ago. They didn't have municipal default problem. Why are we having municipal default problem today? It's because of it's a created crisis. We have allowed municipalities to literally triple deep, double deep, triple deep out of revenue already paid for by citizens,
Yeah.
where they are doing grant-based funding. Government allocates that money to municipalities. So municipalities are not
Okay.
broke. No, there's no money crisis of recovering cash. The crisis is at management. Our problem is
But
total lackluster executive management of these entities, municipalities, as well as EXCOM, as well as Parliament's failure on oversight.
yeah, I hear you, but my point is to fix ESCOM and government should theoretically be simpler because there's a few people you need to replace as
You
opposed to
can't.
all the municipalities.
How is ESCOM going to build its infrastructure now to go and recover electricity rates directly from households? So water utility will have to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Refuse utility provider will have to do
Well,
the
I,
same
I
thing.
would start systemically and say take good performing municipalities before you go to bad
That's what I'm
ones.
saying. That's why they send it up under the one bill system, one stop shop solution, which is a municipality office that bills you according to categories. It worked before
Yeah.
without a problem. What are they having a problem with now that cannot be resolved according to old rules?
Okay, so it's just the rules.
I'm-
So you
yeah,
say it's a simple problem actually to solve. It's just political
it's a
will.
simple problem. They've created the complication. And remember the job of NASA, by
This
NASA.
needs to be your next article, please. One of them, right? I know you've said it in the past. So make sure we
Yeah,
understand how to get ESCOM to recapitalize. That's what I want to figure out because it doesn't seem to me too complicated.
now
Because
go back historically. When ESCOM built power station, it took the revenue that it recovered in the past from the rate, so for setting a rate, right? And where it didn't have the money, it will raise bonds, it will raise capital facilities, and it will pay it back over a period of time, like they would raise from the World Bank and everything. Why has that model been abandoned? Why has that model been frozen now?
because it
ESCOM
worked.
suddenly doesn't have money to build. Why? Because they don't want them to go into the open markets. They don't want them to dip into their own fiscus, which is the workers' pension fund. All right? They don't want them to go into other instruments for building. They don't want them to even revenue accumulation. If ESCOM was to tell us that, guys, we're raising a 20% purely on levies, on rates, right? Tariffs, so that we can, in 1 year, have 200 billion to build a 10 megawatts power station. Who's going to say no? 10,000 megawatts power station. Who's going to say no to it? Well,
So,
they
so,
can
so what
extract.
you're arguing, if I understand, is ESCOM must just be given more powers to bloody run the way they should. They've ran all the way.
No,
It's
not
not.
even given more powers. They must just do their job. They have
And
the powers. This is an act of government. The
my
Electricity Act
God.
is not something made up. South
So
Africans are not doing their job. The leaders are failing us. Those that are sitting in leadership positions are failing us.
and
The
and
laws are
and,
there.
and
The
your view
protection
but what
are
is your
there.
view of NERSA and all of this? Should NERSA be reabsorbed into ESCOM or
NERSA
how is it?
is there to regulate the fairness of tariff structuring, all
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
as a regulatory body. And it
Mm.
does other regulatory work, how operations of electricity environment should be in terms of it. So it's not bad. There's nothing wrong. NERSA just needs to know why you want 1 rand instead of 1 rand 20, or why
Okay.
you want 1 rand 20 instead of say 95 cents. Justify it and give us an elaborate plan. So they're not even there. The decision they make, they just make it on the basis that is it fair and equitable? Does it create the environment that the law and legislation says? The legislation says it must be cheap electricity, it must be affordable. And they've been able to create that environment of providing a cheap and affordable electricity. Even to the point where now the recovery of this mess they created with 450 billion debt with regards to Medupi and Kusile. NERSA allows them to recover part of that tariff from us as consumers who pay on a daily basis to use
That's
this
fine.
electricity.
That's fine.
So
I'm willing to
it
accept
has not
Medupi and
gone.
Kusili was a failure, and the failure was, I mean, the way they structured the EPC was the failure. They were trying to manufacture two things locally, and this is another point. Last point I want to get your view in. There's a
Because
mentality
it
in
was
some.
no failure. They created the looting and corruption environment. You
Yeah,
cannot build a power station for 450 billion and 490 billion in between, allowing for cost overruns and mismanagement and complete mismatches of competencies. And you
yeah.
tell me, after paying 490 billion plus, and you tell me that no, there was an issue in certain things and we didn't. There was no failure. This was strategic money shifting. Go look at the companies that made the money. They're not even South African, man.
But can't we
So
sue them and get the money back? Was that never going to
they
happen?
can't. We said to them, go and recover that money. If anybody does something like that, there is a capacity to recover that money. But when we talk about them because they are multinationals, nobody wants to start the argument
Okay, I
on
hear
cost
what you're
recovery.
saying. Okay, but look, I'm willing to overlook, not to move on. I mean, rather put Medupi and Kusili if proper management comes into place. But the thing that I am really kicking against at the moment is this talk that the private sector is going to come and save us. Okay, this is so stupid on so many levels. First of all, the private sector. I look at Johan Rupert. He's now got his own power plant. Have you seen that thing? A little water thing, 2 megawatts. 2 megawatts.
Mm.
Okay, that's the richest or the 10th richest guy in the country, wherever he is. So he's got one. What's it? He's got 1,000th the size, 1,000th the size of Kuber or any of the other power stations. That's what the richest guy can do. You. Where are we going to find the capital to build new generation from the private sector? I would love for them to do it. I would love for them to prove me wrong tomorrow. We don't have it. We need state capital for this thing, unfortunately.
Look, there is money already committed. There's a couple of trillions, by the way, which I know of, have been already been committed by international venture capital companies, VCs. There's investment bank companies that are currently leading in the world, and they have made a pledge to say we're happy to buy off Eskom and turn it around. So if somebody tells you they're happy to buy your plant, you must know why, which means it's valuable. As long as you undervalue it when they buy it, they're happy to buy it. So some
They can
things
steal it.
don't. I've said to everyone, I said, look, you want to sell Eskom, right? Can you produce for me a due diligence of the entire asset base? The power stations, transmission infrastructure of the kilometers of 400,000 kilometer line, right? Produce me that asset base, right? Produce me an inventory list of the not transmission, of distribution lines and points, substations, everything. Produce me the entire grid in terms of its switching technology. Produce me the value on a due diligence in terms of equitable value of all this whole asset, including the land parcels, including the buildings, including the bylines, all of it. Produce it for me in a due diligence to provide for me. If I were to buy this thing and list it tomorrow and run an IPO on it, I can qualify its value on the open market tomorrow and list it. Can you produce that for me before you say you want to sell it?
It's like Saudi Aramco.
Exactly. Do that exercise. You'll tell me how many trillions this particular asset is worth. Eskom has from generation. Let me not even say generation. It starts from a mine. It has a running a conveyor belt technology on a what do you call it, on a runway which is currently owned on a land that is running on a land, what do you call it, parcels that are owned and controlled and leased or whatever mechanisms of operation they use for kilometers to the mine mouth, right? There is this mine, there is this not mine mouth, from the mine mouth to Eskom power plant. There is this generation power plants that produce electricity. From there, there's the transmission where they evacuate it from the power plant. That transmission runs across the whole country, connects up the entire country, up to the point where at the CPU level, customer premise unit, where electricity is plugged onto your home for your utilities to operate, they have that infrastructure access. So produce me a balance sheet of that particular asset. They all
Yeah,
failed.
of course.
I said, today I can take Eskom to, we don't even need anything. We can take Eskom to what you call a public listing. You don't even need to go and scratch around and talk nonsense with these people who say they are buyers. And when they want to buy, they say to you, Eskom is currently worth 450 billion because of the debt asset it's sitting with of Medupi and Kusile. That's all
Nonsense.
nonsense.
Not nonsense. It's then recovering its cost. Then, if what you
No,
just said to me is recovering.
they are devaluing it to buy it at a 1 rand steel.
Yeah.
So that they say, no, it's worth
It's what we call strip mining. It's what happened in Russia in the 1990s or
They said
Ukraine.
it's worth 100 because you're sitting with this debt obligation that you're not going to pay. You're sitting with the other part of it, which they can offset because the current IPPs are currently being underwritten by the state under the Department of Treasury using a security bond, sovereign security bond. So it's not actually an Eskom obligation anymore. So I say, let's take Eskom, do an IPO, initial public offering onto the Stock Exchange of South Africa of Eskom, like Aramco did when they went and listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and tell me the equitable value, the value of this, the value of this particular asset in rands and cents. And if it was to be privatized with a public, what you call a public
IPO, yeah.
IPO, right? How much will this asset be worth? And if turned around to make profits, how many trillions will Eskom make overnight?
No, it's got a monopoly already.
They're making already 300. They're making 300 billion today of revenue as an NGO. When everything else comes to crunch, Eskom doubles its capacity, refurbishes and builds back and produces electricity equivalent to double its capacity today. It will be worth trillions in terms of revenue intake in a matter of a year to 2 years. So, but these arguments that Africans are not capable of having because they're scared of talking numbers and they're scared of talking fundamentals. Because when you start talking these things, they say, no, you're just being radical. They call us names, you know. You guys are just upset for radical purposes because you want to push for radical economic. I'm not interested in those ideas. We're talking fundamentals to say, if you want to turn around Eskom, let's do a IPO exercise and offering. Let's evaluate this asset. Let's list it. Let's tell the public that we will make it. Whoever wants to buy into it, ordinary people can buy. Anybody can buy. Anybody can participate.
But I'm very skeptical of the entire thing in any ways because look at France now. They had private investors coming in. They were almost destroying EDF through their ridiculous share prices. EDF is renationalized. It's making profit again this year. Okay.
Thank you.
People need to really, and this is really maybe to the white side to speak to, especially Afrikaners, they need to get over their fear of nationalization. Some things are better run national, some things are better run private. Okay. If you have a highway, it's national. If you have a truck on the road, it's private. Okay. Eskom as a nationalized grid utility, just run it the way it was run and fix the problems. It's much easier than trying to play with regulatory reform that can destroy it in the process. You know,
didn't the apartheid government nationalize?
Of course they did. What was utilities? What was Spoornet? What was Transnet? What was Armscor? It was all national.
was created as a national, what you call it, commission. They said Electricity Supply Commission. That's what it was called, Electricity Supply Commission. In there, it says let's nationalize. Let's buy back all the power producing and build even bigger. It's in there by who? Written by Dr.
But the other thing I would bring back, by the way, is Transnet. I would bring back Transnet under a proper nationalized utility. Let it first run through the mines and forget passenger rail for now. Okay, just first run mining and focus on core business. Maybe import LNG, fix your pipeline, and then later you can look into passenger rail. But you see, it's a combination between incompetent people and incompetent policy to try and disentangle this whole mess. Just get proper people to run the thing, and it will be okay.
No, there are proper people running it. There are interferences on the sides. You have this NGO economy, and you have these people who come into South Africa with bearing good news and bearing gifts, telling us that they are going to help us to turn around this country. But at the expense of everything we have. You must get rid of this.
And what angers me is they don't trust the judgment of their own engineers. We've got enough engineers and experts, black and white, in the country that can fix this problem tomorrow. Okay, you just need to equip the right people, and they qualified. They studied in America. They can come back. They're loyal to the country. Everything, and here we go, and we always get advisors from McKinsey to come and help us in the US, as if that's going to solve our problems. You know, this is the mentality that we need to fight. You know?
Exactly. So, you know, when it comes to that level of discrepancy, what do you do when when it's so systematic, there are global players who are
Yeah.
deciding our policy, who are in treasury,
Yeah,
who
but
are in.
that's because our government is clueless. You need people with leadership that can put their foot down against all this pressure. And if you have that, I think you can sort them out very well. Anyways, I want to give you your last thoughts on this thing in ESCOM and things we can look out for the next few weeks. What do you think about that?
Look, with regards to ESCOM, I'm excited with what is currently happening. We are seeing determination whereby the current leadership has really taken all efforts. I mean, the chairman of ESCOM is not an idiot. He has really worked very quietly and hard behind the scene. He's rallying the troops, he's structuring.
And a good sign to me is I don't even know his name. I can't. I have to look it up. And that's a good sign. He's not
Mpoma
in the media.
Yeah, Mpoma Kwana. He's been working a meticulous system behind the scene, setting up the trust structures, setting up the boards, setting up the processes, and ensuring that everybody is responsible. He was the reason that, by the way, Andre de Reuters resigned. When he called
Well,
Andre de Reuter to a meeting, and he read him the Riot Act, and he says, "Listen, I'm the boss now. You are going to have to talk to me on plans that relates to the board instructions. I'm the chief person who has to carry out the board's mandate, and we want to achieve 1, 2, 3." And as a result, Andre got pissed off and told him, "Listen, I'm not going to report to you." And it was the end of it. He gave him a resignation letter when he was called to the, I think it was the second or so meeting
yeah,
from the.
but you see, the writer was always going against the mandate of the Minister of Energy, and I said this to some investors as well. So other day, I said, I'm sorry, but the minister makes policy, not the boss of ESCOM. If he tells you something to do, you follow his policy or you resign. You say, I don't agree, and I'm going to resign. Okay, you resign.
And the
Bye.
policy says clearly, produce electricity and produce a chip. So what did we fail in doing? How come they didn't prioritize the building of ESCOM and the doubling of its capacity, the building of brand new power stations, the introduction of more coal, more nuclear, introduction of a gas, industrial
Energy.
program, the introduction of ensuring that we can even, first of all, before we go industrial on renewables, we create a renewables manufacturing base like what China did. When they told China we have to go green, he says, fine, let's start with the industrial capacity in our country first of it. And they first made, I mean, the production of all the solar panels are first consumed in China. 60% of them are sold in China before they even sell them anywhere else.
Yeah.
What they give you is what they don't need of excess capacity. These are fundamentals. I've been to China. I've been throughout the whole of China. I've been to China power plants. I've seen through what they do. I mean, I know so much about solar as well as solar wafer manufacturing. From
And
a
you invested in Solar Wave, if I understand correctly, right?
highly so, I love it. It's a technology. It's a platform which we can use to industrialize. But let's not cause lies where there are no need. Let's not tell people solar is the only fundamental technology that's going to transform our lives. No. Coal is used in solar. Coal is used in the production of steel that produces the support for the windmill technology. Coal is used in terms of the crystalline sand, the rocks that they use, the crystal that they use, all right, to produce the ingot from a smelter. There are smelters in my village, in my province, in Limpopo, that produces ingots that are crystalline, crystal PV ingots for solar. They produce them at 96% refinery. After burning it for that, they then send it to Spain and Germany, and then Germany does the last stage refinery to produce its final ingot out of it. So we're doing it already. If we were just to create the factory facilities and everything to produce it and sell it locally for local consumption, the excess of it we export throughout the whole of Africa. There's enough market in Africa alone, 54
Of
countries
course.
market. You're not even
But
going
but
to worry about where to
but
sell.
you see, here's how I look at the problem broadly. Okay, to solve poverty development, okay, you need three factors in a very broad sense. One is literacy. The second one is standing of women, fertility, things of that sort. And the third
Mm,
one is electricity. South Africa has the first two. We have full
mm,
literacy almost, okay, and we have lots of women being educated. Women today are more educated in South Africa than they've ever been. All we
mm.
need is electricity so those factories can come. And we have at this point the golden opportunity for that because we have young people, lots of young men without work that will be prepared to go into those jobs, and they are not unskilled labor. It's a technical job. It'll need some training. The factories will come, and we can industrialize. We are at the point where we just need electricity. It's the last ingredient in the pie. So my instruction to government is, if you have to steal money, build electricity for it. I don't know how you're going to do it. Okay, just steal
Hugo,
money if you have
let
to.
me explain to you. We did
Yeah.
an exercise a group of professionals and experts, right? We did an exercise on a very, very, very quiet project where we took the industrialization. If we were to create a solar wafer smelters and refinery facilities, as well as factories to produce the solar panels in South Africa, what is the market value? We found that with the current allocation, let's say at the time there was a plan to offer 8,000 megawatts of gas. We said even if we were to consume that 8,000 megawatts, it's not even enough of that gas, all right, capacity to produce, because you need industrial gas to produce last stage refinery of solar, all right? You need the smelters, high end electricity, high heat electricity, which is electricity based from the ones that is used by mines to produce and smelt the current ingot for solar panels, right? The third thing is you're gonna need standing factories across the coast. After you've done refinery at the coast, you do the standing factories to do the packaging and assembly to make sure that it's last stage finalization. That value alone, we can be the top competitor with China without losing a price range break. We could even export excess of this consumption that is already in the pipeline for South Africa to supplement and augment our current energy plan. We already did this work. With the current allocation of IRP, we could even meet the targets at local industrialization level. So tell me, there is the assumption that Africans are not smart, are silly, or don't know what they're doing. Here I'm an African black. I'm telling you this plan that this exists as an opportunity. So what nonsense is this where there is this interference when we have to industrialize, when we're told to de-industrialize, we're told to scale down on our...
But you see, there's this media narrative that South Africa has no skills and expertise. It's complete bullshit, frankly. Okay, South Africa has got enough industries inside the country at the moment and outside of the diaspora to bring back home, to bring all these technologies. I mean, look at Dubai. The Burj Khalifa was built by South Africans. Okay, they were not the only ones, but they were working there. The power plant in Dubai is built by South Africans at the moment. I know South African executives sitting in oil and gas industry worldwide. Okay, in South Africa, you're talking about all these technology. We've got the mines and things. Are you telling me those technical skills are useless? Are you telling me they're worse than Europe and everything? It's nonsense.
It's worse. VETS and CSIR produced a wafer technology for a solar panel that was bought off in terms of the IP by the Germans, which they found was the best, which they currently are the ones who are producing it right now in China, using our produced local technology in South Africa, which we export back at this amount to export a 450 watt panel in South Africa. You pay 3,500 rand for 450 watt panel, one panel. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to have a minimum of 10 panels on a roof in order to have a sufficient draw of the electricity sunlight in order to create electricity energy that is stored in the batteries or that can be used in a basic utility. So just make up the mindset. 35,000 for panels, 10 panels, 3,500 to produce them. Which industrial capacity will not exist with such a market? With over 12 million households in this country. We're not even talking export.
So you're on the same page as me, which is the only thing that prevents those type of deals from going through, because they're entrepreneurial, you need clever people for them, is basically the lack of electricity at the moment. The lack of power on the
grid. You need electricity to run refineries.
Here's and this is the last argument because we really are over now already. My argument is that South Africa should go into a debt expansion. I know people don't like it. We can use our pension money. I don't know we don't want to like it to build power stations, to have electricity on the grid, so those things can happen. And the debt expansion will be paid for, very quickly by the new GDP growth, because we have all these young men to do the work. Okay, I've done some numbers on that, and it seems to me within 5 to 7 years you pay back the money for the power stations. It's quick.
Look, Treasury, the current minister, the new minister, Gorongwana, already pushed for that, where we could use South African pension funds to actually start but start funding the growth and transformation of Eskom. They blocked him.
Really?
So you tell me, how do you work in an environment where you're not in charge? You want to do things, but you can't because you're not in charge. Politicians are
But
not in
but but
charge.
you
The
see
leaders
why
are not
they
in.
block him? Why no why they block him is this: if you have government to government transactions, which is usually what happens with pension money, it's very strict due diligence, very strict compliance. EPC will be properly
Wonderful.
managed. Middlemen will not come
Nothing
into the
wrong.
deal. There's no money to steal. That's why they don't want to do it. There's no money
Why
to
must
steal.
we steal our development? That's the first problem right there. Why must I steal my development? This air I'm breathing now is going to benefit my lungs, but I want to steal it. Why
Yeah,
must I do that?
because if it's pension fund money, the first thing the pension money will say, okay, high risk. You must know it's the country's money. It's the money of your grandchildren. Let's face it. Okay, what are we going to do?
Yes.
I want to buy turnkey technology that works, been tested, approved, whatever. There's no middleman in this deal, and I want the best guys managing it, and that's what they're scared of.
Nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. That's accountability. That's openness and a fair country. Like what they do to you in China. You steal a single rand from the state and you deprive people's development. They hang you as a minister, even as the top 10 of the Politburo leadership of China. Top 10.
Well, in America, even Westinghouse, they're going to lock up now the CEO for stealing money at Vochtel for 25 years because it's also pension money. You see, it's criminal law. This is what they're scared of. It's criminal law coming into play. It's not your friend's money that goes missing in this
Yeah.
story.
So we should do that. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, let's do
Our
it.
pension funds should be used, should be semi-allocated right now. Let me tell you, by the way, pension fund of South Africa's pension funds from the Public Investment Corporation, from PIC, 40% of it is currently sitting on the stock exchange. The current volume of it sitting on the stock exchange, 40% of that money is currently exposed on foreign offshore investments. Did you know that? They're
I
investing
thought it was
offshore.
60% already.
It's
I know
40%.
60% of the 60% of the JSE is in foreign countries, so those numbers don't surprise me.
Yeah. So 40% of currently the money that is held by pensions in South Africa on the JSE is used to invest outside. They're not doing any
But you
local
see,
investment.
here's why pension funds are stupid. Okay, they should go to government and say, look, we are prepared to invest in infrastructure and this, but we want regulatory reform to make sure there's compliance. That's what I would do if I was them. I would do it. I would approve it under condition that this, and this, and this happens. So you lock up people immediately. I want you to appoint the best prosecuting general for the NPA, or what's it, Master Prosecutor Authority, the best guy. And I want 10 lawyers standing ready. And if the first guy steals money, we throw him in jail. That's how I would do it. And I said, then now,
Yeah.
okay, if you can prove to me you've locked up a few guys, and then we put our money down. You would do something like that. Now we're at the end of the story.
Look, in South Africa, there's no prisons for the rich. I mean, we failed when PIC money was stolen by what's his company that lost lots of money from PIC.
Olsen, isn't it? Did it Olsen and Lafarge?
No, the
Oh,
Stellenbosch company that lost
oh,
money.
oh, that
Yeah,
that guy with the horses. What's his name?
yeah, that,
Steinhoff.
yeah.
Steinhoff.
Steinhoff. When Steinhoff lost lots of money, we couldn't even book them into a police station. They told South African authorities what conditions they're going to be engaging them on. They couldn't even get to a police station. So, so when you say what you're saying, it sounds lovely, but implementation practicality. So
No, but
look,
public opinion should ask for these things. Anyways, I would like to thank you to the Crown Prince Adil Nchabeleng. Thanks for this discussion. I think we're going to do it on a more regular basis to try and get these narratives exposed. So thank you.
let's have a conversation regularly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And thank you everyone for listening. Please share this around.
Much appreciation. Thank you so much.